Brothers and sisters of the continent and across the seas, today marks the rise of a powerful awakening. From the heart of Africa to the corners of the globe where our people have journeyed, a new movement is blooming, a call not just for unity, but for true, lasting liberation. No longer are we fragments scattered by history's storms. We are one people, one soul, one destiny. We are reclaiming the rhythm of our ancestors, the wisdom of our elders, and the dreams of our children. For too long, Africa was spoken of as a place to be pitied, divided, or exploited. But now a different voice rises, one that does not ask for permission to be proud, one that does not wait for validation from powers that never served us. This voice reminds us of who we are, the builders of kingdoms, the protectors of sacred lands, the visionaries of tomorrow. Across the diaspora, hearts are turning back to the motherland, no longer in sorrow or nostalgia, but in purpose, in strategy, in strength. We are seeing our artists, our thinkers, our workers, and our warriors reconnect with the soil of their roots, not as strangers, but as sons and daughters returning to build. We are learning each other again. Africans are reaching out to the diaspora, not as foreigners, but as family. And the diaspora is embracing the continent not as a relic of the past, but as a key to the future. Our languages, our music, our histories, these are not lost. They are alive. And they are weapons in the battle for dignity, truth, and self-determination. This unity is not symbolic. It is practical. It is economic. It is cultural. It is political. Together, we are building networks of trade, systems of education, and platforms of expression that serve our people, not foreign interests. We are telling our own stories and writing our own futures. The world watches, some in fear, some in awe, as Africa and her children rise with one heartbeat. Let it be clear, this is not the unity of convenience. This is the unity of necessity, of survival, of destiny. We are not coming together because it is fashionable. We are coming together because we must, because the time has come to be the authors of our own revolution. The message is simple. Africa belongs to Africans, those who live on her soil and those who carry her spirit wherever they are in the world. And when we move together, there is no force that can break us. Let this be our era. Let this be the time our children remember, when Africa stood up and the world could no longer look away. Africans on the continent and in the diaspora are uniting like never before, not just culturally, but with a shared purpose, identity, and vision for the future. This unity is not born from convenience or temporary emotions, but from centuries of struggle, survival, and unspoken connection that has lived in the hearts of African people everywhere. Across oceans and generations, that connection has remained, and now it is being activated with clarity and power. What we are witnessing today is more than a cultural renaissance. It is a deep political and spiritual alignment. From the cities of Lagos to the streets of Paris, from the villages of Ghana to the neighborhoods of Harlem and Brixton, African voices are echoing the same message. We are one. We may speak different languages and live under different flags, but the blood that runs through our veins remembers where it came from. That memory is not just emotional. It is strategic. It is building a movement that is organized, intentional, and grounded in shared values and responsibilities. This wave of unity is dissolving the artificial borders that history imposed. Colonial lines drawn by foreign powers no longer define who we are. Instead, we are forming connections based on our own truths, on our shared struggle against oppression, on our mutual dreams of liberation, and on our common cultural genius. Music, fashion, art, literature, and philosophy are becoming bridges that reconnect us. Young people are using digital platforms to rediscover their roots, share knowledge, and build networks of cooperation that stretch across the world. The diaspora is no longer distant from Africa. It is actively engaged. People of African descent around the globe are investing in the continent, not only financially, but with time, love, and vision. They are returning to their ancestral lands to start businesses, collaborate on innovation, and participate in governance and education. And in return, Africa is opening its arms, not with nostalgia, but with the confidence of a continent that knows its worth and demands mutual respect. The conversation has shifted from aid to agency, from handouts to partnerships, from exile to return. In this new movement, African identity is no longer shaped by the gaze of others. It is defined by us for us. We are shedding the images that once painted us as victims, as backward, or as divided. We are taking control of our own stories. The African experience is not singular, but it is united in purpose. Whether in the Caribbean, North America, South America, Europe, or on the continent itself, there is a collective understanding now. Our destinies are intertwined. We will not rise separately, we will rise together. And this unity is not passive, it is active and fierce. It is being seen in Pan-African movements, in community organizations, in policy debates, and in acts of resistance. It is present when we defend our resources, our people, and our right to chart our own future. It is visible in our solidarity when we stand up against exploitation, whether it comes in the form of economic theft, cultural appropriation, or systemic violence. We are no longer waiting for others to speak on our behalf. We are speaking for ourselves, and we are listening to one another. This is the birth of a new era, where African unity is not a dream, but a practical reality. It is an awakening that calls every African, wherever they may be, to remember that they are part of something bigger. It calls us to honor our ancestors by continuing the work they began, the work of freedom, of dignity, of building a world where African people live with justice and sovereignty. It calls us to look beyond personal ambition and see the larger mission, to uplift our people, restore our lands, and ensure that future generations inherit a future we can be proud of. We are no longer scattered. We are reassembled. We are no longer disconnected. We are aligned. Across oceans, across borders, and across barriers, the African spirit is rising, united in vision, united in strength, and united in the promise that we are not only the children of a great past, but the builders of a greater future. A new voice is emerging from Africa, bold, unapologetic, and rooted in ancestral pride. It rejects outdated narratives of weakness and instead asserts Africa's strength, legacy, and rightful place in the world. This voice is not born from imitation or the desire to be accepted by others. It rises from within, shaped by the struggles and victories of generations who have refused to forget where they come from. It is the sound of a people reclaiming what was taken, denied, or distorted. It is the sound of a continent remembering its worth and refusing to let the world define it any longer. For too long, Africa was described in terms of poverty, war, and chaos. The richness of its civilizations, the brilliance of its minds, and the power of its cultures were buried under a narrative of victimhood and dependence. But those days are ending. A new generation is stepping forward, one that carries the pain of the past, but wears it like armor, not chains. They do not apologize for being African. They do not ask for permission to speak. They speak because they must. And when they do, they carry with them the spirit of millions who came before them. This reclamation of pride is not about arrogance. It is about balance. For centuries, Africa was spoken of as if it had nothing to offer, as if it needed saving, managing, or civilizing. But the truth is, Africa has always had knowledge, wisdom, and beauty. Its kingdoms were advanced. Its people were skilled in science, medicine, governance, and art. The philosophies born in African soil guided communities with justice and harmony long before colonialism arrived. That history was not lost, it was buried, and now it is being unearthed. Young Africans are now reading the works of their own scholars. They are speaking their native languages with pride. They are wearing traditional garments with elegance. They are naming their children with meaning. The world watches as African fashion, music, food, and design take center stage, not as trends to be copied, but as expressions of deep-rooted identity. This is more than culture, it is resistance. Every act of pride is a rejection of erasure. Every celebration of heritage is a statement, we are still here. We never disappeared. and we are not going anywhere. This rising pride is also political. Africans are challenging the systems that kept them on the margins. They are rewriting constitutions, demanding accountability, and redefining leadership. They are asking hard questions about who benefits from African resources and who controls African narratives, and they are not waiting for outside validation. They are building their own institutions, financing their own futures, and speaking with a voice that is clear, confident, and collective. No longer content to be ruled by outdated systems or governed by foreign interests, Africa is turning inward for strength and outward with purpose. There is also a spiritual return happening. Africans are reconnecting with indigenous belief systems, honoring their ancestors, and embracing traditional values of community, respect, and balance with nature. These are not relics of the past. They are living principles guiding people toward a more grounded future. In a world that often feels fragmented and disconnected, Africa is offering something deeply human, the understanding that identity is sacred and that true power comes from knowing who you are. The reclaiming of African pride is not isolated to the continent. In the diaspora, people of African descent are also rising. They are rejecting shame, re-educating themselves, and finding strength in their roots. They are building bridges back to the continent, not as tourists, but as kin. The pride that is growing in Lagos is echoing in London. The confidence seen in Accra is mirrored in Atlanta. This is not coincidence. It is connection. It is the awakening of a global African spirit that has been waiting for this moment. Africa is not asking for space. It is claiming it. It is not begging for inclusion. It is demanding respect. And as this new voice grows louder, the world must listen, not out of fear, but out of recognition. Because Africa is not just part of the world's future. It is leading it. It is shaping it. And it is doing so with a confidence that is rooted in truth. This is the season of reclaiming. It is not a reaction to the past, but a declaration of the future. Africa will no longer be seen through borrowed eyes. It will be seen through its own. And in that vision, there is power, not just the power to survive, but the power to lead, to inspire, and to transform the world. The diaspora is returning to Africa not with pity or distance, but with intent, love, and the desire to rebuild, seeing the continent as the source of power and possibility. This return is not only physical, it is spiritual, intellectual, cultural, and emotional. For centuries, those who were taken from the continent and their descendants have lived under the weight of disconnection, separated from their roots by force, colonization, slavery, and generations of cultural suppression. But now the tide is turning. Across the world, people of African descent are rediscovering where they come from, not as outsiders, but as children finding their way back home. This reconnection is not based on nostalgia or romanticized visions of the past. It is based on truth, on curiosity, and on a deep understanding that Africa holds the keys to both historical healing and future prosperity. The diaspora is coming back with open eyes and open hearts, not to save, but to serve. They are bringing with them skills, resources, ideas, and energy to contribute to the continent's progress, not as guests, but as rightful heirs to its legacy. The movement is growing through education, travel, business, and cultural exchange. More people of African descent are learning African history from African perspectives. They are studying African languages, celebrating African festivals, and exploring the richness of the continent's traditions. This learning is empowering. It fills the void that colonial education left behind and repairs the broken links in identity. It allows those in the diaspora to see Africa not as a problem to be solved, but as a foundation on which to build. In cities like Accra, Kigali, Nairobi, and Dakar, you can see this shift unfolding in real time. Diaspora returnees are starting businesses, investing in infrastructure, and collaborating with local communities. They are creating schools, tech hubs, art galleries, wellness spaces, and sustainable farms. They are participating in policymaking, working with grassroots organizations, and mentoring young people. This is a partnership built on mutual respect, where both the diaspora and the continent understand they have something vital to offer each other. The emotional aspect of this return cannot be overlooked. Many in the diaspora carry generational trauma, the pain of being disconnected from their homeland, of being raised in lands where their identity was questioned or devalued. To walk on African soil, to see faces that look like one's own, to hear the rhythms and taste the foods of ancestors, this is not just a visit. It is a moment of restoration. It is a healing that runs deeper than words. It fills a void that no amount of success or assimilation in foreign lands could ever satisfy. By returning and engaging with the continent directly, members of the diaspora become living witnesses to Africa's vibrancy, resilience, and potential. They counter the tired narratives of despair with stories of creativity, innovation, and strength. They become ambassadors for a more accurate and dignified image of Africa, helping shift global perceptions and amplify African voices on the world stage. But perhaps most importantly, this movement is about unity. It is about realizing that Africa is not whole without her children, and the children of Africa are not whole without their mother. The journey back is not always simple. It comes with challenges, misunderstandings, and the work of building trust. But the desire to reconnect is greater than the obstacles, and every act of return, every bridge built, every collaboration formed is a step closer to healing the wound of separation that has lasted for too long. This return is not only for the benefit of those coming back, it also strengthens Africa. It expands the continent's influence, increases its access to global networks, and adds to its human capital. When the diaspora and the continent move together, they become a force, a global African family with unmatched potential. A family that understands that its unity is its greatest strength. The vision is clear, a world where the lines drawn by history no longer divide us. Where Africa is not seen as distant or different, but as home. Where every person of African descent knows that they belong, that they are needed, and that they have a role to play in the continent's rise. The return is not a trend, it is a movement, a reconnection, a resurrection. Africa is calling, and her children are answering not with hesitation, but with pride, purpose, and love. African languages, histories, and traditions are being revived and celebrated as vital tools for liberation and identity, not relics of the past, but blueprints for the future. This revival is not merely about remembrance. It is a powerful act of resistance and reconstruction. It is a deliberate effort by Africans and the global African diaspora to reclaim what was suppressed, devalued, or erased during centuries of colonization, slavery, and cultural domination. In a world that has long tried to define Africa through the lens of others, this cultural awakening is a refusal to be spoken for. It is a choice to speak, create, and live in the fullness of African identity. The revival extends to art, music, fashion, architecture, and food. Traditional instruments are being played alongside modern beats. Indigenous textiles are influencing global fashion trends. Ancestral hairstyles and beauty practices are being worn with pride. Chefs are returning to local ingredients and ancient recipes. Architects are drawing inspiration from traditional housing structures that were both sustainable and in harmony with nature. These cultural expressions are not just aesthetic. They carry the memory of who Africans were and the vision of who they are becoming. This resurgence of culture is also deeply linked to healing. Colonialism and slavery were not only physical acts of violence, but also psychological ones. They stripped millions of their sense of self. Today, the revival of African culture is offering a path back to wholeness. It is helping people reconnect with their roots, their purpose, and their community. It is reminding them that they are not lost, not broken, not incomplete. They are part of a lineage of brilliance, resilience, and creativity. Technology has become a crucial ally in this movement. Digital platforms are allowing African creators to share their work with global audiences. Social media is filled with young people discussing African spirituality, rediscovering their clan histories, showcasing traditional dances, and promoting indigenous knowledge. Podcasts, films, blogs, and online courses are making African wisdom accessible in ways never seen before. This digital cultural revolution is connecting the continent and its diaspora, allowing for collaboration, learning, and solidarity. At the heart of this revival is the understanding that African culture is not static. It evolves, it adapts, and it responds to the needs of the people. The goal is not to freeze traditions in time, but to breathe new life into them, to let them inform modern realities while staying true to their essence. African knowledge systems are being applied to address today's challenges, from climate resilience to conflict resolution, from education reform to economic development. What once was dismissed as outdated is now being recognized as deeply relevant. This cultural awakening is a reminder that Africa does not need to borrow from the world to define itself. The answers, the beauty, and the power have always been within. By reviving its culture and knowledge, Africa is not returning to the past. It is building a future that is confident, sovereign, and rooted in truth. The world is watching, and more importantly, listening, as Africa finds its voice again, loud and clear. Economic, educational, cultural, and political systems are being created by Africans for Africans, rejecting dependency and establishing true self-determination. This transformation is not simply about changing policies or replacing foreign models. It is about a complete reimagining of how societies function, one that centers African values, realities, and aspirations. For far too long, the continent has been operating within systems imposed by outside powers, systems that were never designed to serve African people, but rather to exploit their labor, land, and resources. Now, that tide is turning. A new generation is stepping forward with the clarity that Africa must not only stand on its own, but must define its own direction across the continent. Local economic models are gaining momentum. Africans are creating financial systems that reflect the needs of their communities, rather than mimicking Western markets that often exclude the poor and favor the elite. In rural and urban areas alike, cooperatives, rotating savings groups, and community-owned enterprises are offering alternatives to exploitative capitalism. Microfinance and mobile money systems developed in Africa are now being studied around the world for their innovation and impact. The goal is clear: to build economies where wealth circulates among the people, not upward into foreign-owned institutions. This economic shift is about ownership of land, of production, of ideas, and of destiny. In education, the push for African-led systems is equally powerful. The continent is moving beyond colonial curricula that prioritized foreign languages, European history, and Western ideals, while ignoring African knowledge, languages, and experience. A new educational movement is rising, one that teaches students to think critically, understand their heritage, and contribute to the continent's development. Schools are beginning to include African philosophy, indigenous sciences, and local literature. Universities are supporting African research on African issues written by African scholars. The goal is not only to produce workers for someone else's economy, but to raise thinkers, leaders, and innovators who will build Africa from within. Culturally, there is a deep and growing understanding that Africans must own their narratives. For too long, others have told Africa's story, often with distortion, pity, or prejudice. Now, African filmmakers, writers, musicians, and visual artists are taking control of their voices and using their talents to reflect their realities with truth and dignity. From Nollywood to Afrofuturism, from traditional storytelling to digital animation, the continent is rich with creators who are reshaping how Africans see themselves and how the world sees Africa. These cultural systems go beyond entertainment. They shape identity, build pride, and create social cohesion. Politically, a new wave of thought is challenging the structures inherited from colonial rule. Many of the post-independence political models failed to deliver true sovereignty because they maintained the same frameworks left behind by colonizers: centralized power, elitism, corruption, and foreign dependence. But now, grassroots movements, youth-led campaigns, and indigenous governance models are being explored and revived. There is growing advocacy for systems that reflect African traditions of consensus building, community leadership, and accountability. In some places, traditional councils and elders are being integrated into local decision-making. In others, women and youth are being elevated into spaces of power that were previously closed to them. The objective is not simply to hold elections, it is to build governance that truly reflects the will and the wisdom of the people. This shift toward African-led systems is grounded in the principle of self-determination. Africans are no longer looking outward for validation or solutions. They are recognizing that the answers to their most pressing challenges already exist within their cultures, histories, and communities. Whether it is food security through indigenous farming methods, conflict resolution through traditional mediation practices, or climate adaptation using local ecological knowledge, Africa is demonstrating that it has the capacity to lead itself. This leadership is not driven by ego, but by necessity, a recognition that dependency has cost too much for too long. Technology is playing a vital role in supporting these changes. Across the continent, young entrepreneurs and engineers are using tech to solve local problems, from e-learning platforms to healthcare apps, from energy access solutions to digital governance tools. These innovations are being developed in African languages, tailored to African environments, and built with African realities in mind. Rather than importing solutions from abroad, Africa is becoming a hub of ingenuity, exporting ideas that work because they are grounded in the everyday experiences of the people. What is emerging is a continent that is no longer asking what it can take from the world, but what it can build for itself. A continent that sees itself not as behind, but as different, uniquely positioned to create models of progress that reflect its soul. The systems now being developed are not just for survival, but for liberation. They are meant to carry Africa into a future where it does not merely adapt to the world, but helps shape it. This is the essence of sovereignty, when a people define, design, and direct their own lives. And that future is now being written by African hands. This unity is not symbolic or trendy. It is a strategic, necessary movement rooted in survival, strength, and destiny. It goes beyond mere slogans or fleeting moments of solidarity. It is born from the deepest understanding that for Africa and its people to truly thrive, they must align their collective efforts in a way that transcends borders, ideologies, and divisions. The unity being called for is not for show. It is an urgent necessity. In a world that has often sought to fragment and divide Africa, the call for unity is an answer to a history of exploitation, division, and fragmentation. This is a call for a shared vision, a unified purpose, and an unbreakable resolve. When Africa and its people move together, they become unstoppable. For centuries, Africa has faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. Colonialism, slavery, resource extraction, political instability, and external interference have all sought to weaken the continent. These forces have worked tirelessly to ensure that Africa remained divided, weakened, and unable to leverage its full potential. But in these times of profound change, the people of Africa, both on the continent and in the diaspora, are realizing that they are stronger when they unite. This unity is not just an emotional desire for togetherness, but a calculated, intentional response to the forces that seek to keep Africa fractured and subjugated. Unity is a force of resistance. When Africa and its people unite, they no longer have to fight battles alone. Instead of working in isolation, every African can draw strength from the knowledge that millions share the same fight. They can draw inspiration from the fact that they belong to a larger family, one that spans continents and generations. This sense of belonging provides the emotional and intellectual fortitude to withstand adversity and navigate the complexities of the modern world. It is a deep, unshakable confidence that arises from knowing that the collective power of Africa is a force to be reckoned with. Strategically, unity allows Africa to amplify its influence on the global stage. For too long, the continent has been marginalized, with its voice drowned out by the interests of foreign powers. But when Africa speaks with one voice, it becomes impossible to ignore. Whether in international institutions, trade negotiations, or global political discourse, Africa's unified presence will not be overlooked. The continent has vast natural resources, untapped human potential, and a rich cultural heritage. When this potential is harnessed collectively, Africa can reshape the global order, moving from being a passive recipient of aid to an active shaper of global outcomes. The call for unity is not just about politics and economics, it is a spiritual and cultural awakening. Africa's unity is rooted in a shared cultural consciousness that spans across the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and beyond. The African diaspora, long separated from the continent by the brutality of slavery and colonialism, is now returning with a renewed sense of connection and purpose. People of African descent in the Americas, the Caribbean, Europe, and Asia are reconnecting with their roots, not out of nostalgia, but to contribute to the greater whole. This unity is built on the knowledge that Africa's strength lies not only in its land and resources, but also in its people, scattered across the globe, but bound by a shared history and future. This unity is about reclaiming Africa's place in the world. The time is now for Africa to assert itself, not as a passive observer, but as an active participant in the global conversation. It is time to stop apologizing for its existence and start demanding the respect and recognition that it deserves. Unity allows Africa to negotiate from a position of strength, not weakness. It ensures that African nations are no longer treated as mere recipients of charity, but as equal partners in the global order, with a voice that is strong, assertive, and unapologetic. Moreover, unity is the key to overcoming the internal divisions that have long plagued the continent. Africa has been fragmented by ethnic, linguistic, and political divisions, often exacerbated by external forces. These divisions have been weaponized to keep Africa weak, pitting communities against each other and preventing the continent from realizing its true potential. But unity is a powerful antidote to division. When Africans unite, they transcend these differences and recognize the shared history that binds them together. They understand that their strength lies not in their differences, but in their ability to celebrate diversity while working toward common goals. Unity also brings with it the promise of collective progress. When Africans work together, they create a synergy that magnifies the impact of their individual efforts. Whether in the fight against poverty, the advancement of education, the protection of natural resources, or the creation of sustainable industries, Africa's collective power can produce solutions that benefit all. By coming together, African nations can pool their resources, expertise, and creativity to tackle challenges that no single country could face alone. This unity becomes a force for social, political, and economic transformation that will uplift entire communities and build a continent that is not only self-sufficient, but also a beacon of hope for the rest of the world. Ultimately, this call for purposeful unity is not just a vision for Africa's future. It is a recognition of Africa's destiny. The continent is poised for greatness, and that greatness will only be realized when its people stand together, with one heart, one mind, and one purpose. Unity is Africa's path to reclaiming its rightful place in the world, not as a victim of history, but as a leader of the future. The future of Africa is bright, and when its people unite, they will be an unstoppable force, reshaping the world and charting a new course for humanity.